Hey, thanks for joining us today at Mount Pisgah Church. This morning we're going to be in the book of Numbers, chapters 13 and 14, answering a really vital and important question, and that is this: what fills your heart, faith or fear? The experience of the spies from Israel going to check out the promised land really gives us a beautiful illustration as to the answer to that question. It will determine the quality of your life each day and your walk with God. If you're ever in the Mount Pisgah area, we meet on Sunday morning, 10 a.m., 1288 Mount Pisgah Church Road, Apex, North Carolina. And as always, if you have any prayer needs, please feel free to put them down in the comment section below. We do pray that the joy of the Lord will be your strength today. Again, thanks for joining us. All right, if you would, let's open up scriptures to the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, chapter 13. Numbers 13. And we're going to be really answering a really important question, and that is, what fills your heart? Not just this morning, but most days of your life. Is it faith or is it fear? Our lives are all driven literally by one of those two things. And this story of the nation of Israel and them preparing to go into the promised land, sending spies in, has a very good illustration of that reality. In chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Send men, that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I give to the sons of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a prince among them. Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of Adonai, and all of them were men who were heads of the sons of Israel. These were their names: of the tribe of Reuben, Shammua, the son of Zakur; of the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, the son of Ori; the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh; of the tribe of Issachar, Igal, the son of Joseph; of the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun; of the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, the son of Raphu; of the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, the son of Sodi; of the tribe of Joseph; of the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Susi; of the tribe of Dan, Amiel, the son of Gemali; of the tribe of Asher, Shethur, the son of Mikael; of the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, the son of Vosi; of the tribe of Gad, Geuel, the son of Maki. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and they said to them, Go up this way by the south, and go up into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who dwell there are strong or weak, few or many. Is the land they dwell in good or bad? Are the cities they dwell in unwalled or fortified? Is the land fat or lean? Are there trees in it or not? Be courageous and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Sin to Rehob, to the entrance of Hamath. They went up by the south, and they came to Hebron. And Ahiman, Shishai, and Talmai, the children of Anak, were there. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. They came to the valley of Eshcol, and they cut down from there a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bore it on a staff between two. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. That place was called the valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the sons of Israel cut down from there. They returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days. They went and came to Moses in Aaron, and they said to all the congregations of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and they brought back word to them, to all the congregation. They showed them the fruit of the land. They told them and said, We came to the land where you sent us. Surely it flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, The people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. Amalek dwells in the land of the south. The Hittite, the Jebusite, the Amorite dwell in the hill country. The Canaanite dwells by the sea and along the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." But the men who went up with him said, "We're not able to go up against the people, for they're stronger than we." They brought up an evil report of the land which they had spied out to the sons of Israel, saying, "The land through which we've gone to spy out is a land that eats up its inhabitants, and all the people who we saw in it are men of great stature. There also we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." Then all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept all that night. And all the sons of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, "We wish we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died in this wilderness. Why does Adonai bring us to this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will be captured or killed. Would it not be better for us to return into Egypt?" They said to one another, "Let us choose a leader and return to Egypt." Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Israel. Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were of those who spied out the land, tore their clothes. They spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, "The land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If Adonai delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against Adonai, neither fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is removed from over them, and Adonai is with us. Do not fear them." But all the congregation threatened to stone them with stones. Then the glory of Adonai appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. In that moment, I think it would have been an uh-oh moment for the people who were rebelling. This is a great deal that we can learn from this story, and it's full of all kind of rich truths. But from this bad report that's given from the spies concerning the promised land, and it really does reveal what the consequences are for each of us individually and a people collectively of having a heart that's either full of faith or one that is full of fear. And remember, we said this before, the greatest enemy of faith is not unbelief. The greatest enemy of faith is fear, because fear is what fuels and produces unbelief. That's the key. And so it's important to understand what's in our hearts as we walk with God each and every day. Now, as we go through this story, one of the most important things I think is the very beginning as we start out is to understand that God did not necessarily sanction or command them to do this mission. We say, wait a minute, when we read there, it says the Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Send men that they may spy out the land of Canaan." Well, that's what it says, but the idea is here, because we find this out in the book of Deuteronomy, God permitted them to do it. He didn't ask them to do it. He did not command them to do it, but God permitted them to do it. God himself was not sold on the idea, because he's already given them a full explanation of what the land was like. He's already told them what it would be like. He's already told them and assured them he's already given it to them. It's a done deal. Trust me. But they were not satisfied by that. The people asked for this. We find in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 19 through 24, it says, as Moses is recounting their journey, "Then we journeyed from Oreb and went through all that great and terrible wilderness that you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, as Adonai our God commanded us. Then we came to Kadesh Barnea, and I said to you, you've come to the hill country of the Amorites, which Adonai our God is giving to us. See, Adonai your God has set the land before you. Go up, take possession as Adonai, God of your fathers, has promised you. Don't be afraid or be discouraged. Then all of you came near to me and said, let's send men ahead of us to explore the land for us and bring us back word about the way we should go and the cities we will enter. Moses said, well, the idea seemed good to me, so I took 12 men from among you, one man from each tribe. They turned and went up to the hill country, and they came to the Wadi Eshcol there and spied it out. Notice, nowhere in there does it say God told them to send spies. They wanted to. He had prefaced all of that by saying, go up, the land is yours. It's a land flow, all of that. But they didn't believe that. They wanted to see it for themselves. And they're going to learn a very, very important lesson about the difference between walking by what you see and perceive and listening with an obedient ear to God. One of the things that is interesting that every day, 3 times a day, or so at least twice a day for sure, when Israel prays, and we went through this several years ago, the Amidah, and they pray and they say the Shema, which Jesus said is the first and most important, greatest commandment. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. They cover their eyes. The reason why they cover their eyes is because their relationship with God was never supposed to be based upon what they saw. It's a relationship because it starts out, Shema, listen. Your relationship with God is based on hearing Him and obeying Him. It's interesting, the Hebrew language really doesn't have an extensive word for obey. Shema is what contains it. It's listen and do what He says for you to do. You will not go by what you see, but by what I say. Paul echoes this again in the New Testament, for we walk by faith, not by sight. He understood this. So God did not sanction this first and foremost. The second thing is that when Moses did send them, he told them in verse 20 of chapter 13 to be of good courage. Chazak. It's an intense word of being fortified in your heart and strong and resilient and committed. Be full of courage as you go. And one of the things about courage is that courage is never the absence of fear. But courage is the will and the ability to do what needs to be done in spite of your fear. Jesus would call His disciples to do a lot of things. And granted, many times when He invited them into these adventures, there was some anxiety probably naturally in their heart. But they did it. Because again, for a person to be courageous doesn't mean there's no fear there or no, hesitancy in one sense or that emotional feeling of fear. But it's doing it anyway. Because you're not walking by what you see. You're walking and doing what you're doing based on what God said. In this whole narrative, there is one word that changes everything when these guys came back from having gone up into the land to observe it and to bring back this report. And that word is in verse 28. They've laid all of this out, and then in verse 28, they say something very important, giving the report. The very first word, however, or nevertheless. Some translations have but. It's the word ephes in Hebrew. And it's a word that it is literally a word that is the difference between faith and doubt. But, however, nevertheless, this was the expression of their unbelief. And here's the thing. 12 guys went into that land to spy it out, and every single one of them saw the exact same thing. The exact same people, the exact same cities, the exact same wilderness, the rivers, they saw it all. They saw the same thing. But one word turned that report into to a prediction of defeat. One word given by those 10 spies. Joshua and Caleb didn't buy the lie. They knew that was a lie. They knew that it was not true. They knew that God had already told them, the land is yours. You're going to go in. I'm going to give it to you. I've already given it to you. Go in, but you are responsible to go in and conquer it, and I will make sure you will conquer it. You see, here's the thing. Faith and doubt will see the exact same thing. And doubt, remember, and we'll see in a moment, is always going to be fueled by fear. They see the same thing, but faith interprets it differently than fear does. A good example of this is the person Abraham. Paul tells us in Romans 4:18 through 21, talking about Abraham, the father of all men and women of faith, it says, in hope beyond hope, he trusted he would become the father of many nations according to what was spoken. What God said, so shall your descendants be. And without becoming weak in faith, he considered his own body as good as dead, since he was already 100 years old, and the deadness of Sarah's womb. She'd already gone through menopause. She was an old lady. Yet, he did not waver in unbelief concerning the promise of God. Rather, he was strengthened in faith, giving glory to God. He was fully convinced that what God had promised, he was also able to do. Abraham saw the reality. My body's old. Sarah's womb is dead. But that did not cause him to doubt God. He believed what God said in spite of what he knew to be true and knew to be fact. Faith doesn't ask you to deny facts. Were there giants in the land? Yes. Was the land, were there fortified cities? Yes. All of that was true. And it was a land abounding with milk and honey. But Joshua and Caleb did not interpret what they saw with fear. They interpreted what they saw with confidence in what God had already said. And they knew that God would give the land to them. Just like Abraham interpreted his situation with faith and not fear. And unbelief is really, truly rooted in fear. You see, fear, when it fills our heart, says God cannot and will not do what He promised. Or some people will say, yes, I know God can, but there's that word again. But, however, efes, not nevertheless, I know God can, but, and immediately when that but is put in there, things change. Fear says, I can't do what God is asking me to do. I can't do it. Fear is based again on what we see and we are focused on, and not on God and what He has said. And fear is always based on a lie, ultimately. Always. Always. There's an interesting part of this story, and a lot that when we just kind of gloss over it in English, we don't stop and ponder what really happened when these guys gave this bad report. Because down in verse 32 of chapter 13, it tells us that these 10 spies brought up an evil report of the land, which they had spied out to the sons of Israel, and they were telling the sons of Israel, the land through which we've gone to spy out, it's a land that eats up its inhabitants. All the people we saw in it are men of great stature. We saw Nephilim, the sons of Anak. We saw, they come from the Nephilim. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And all the congregation, chapter 14 says, they lifted up their voice and they cried, and the people wept all night long. Notice it says they spread an evil report. It wasn't that they were just standing in front of Moses and some folks were listening. That happened, yes. But then what they went on and continued to do, they slandered and literally they invented a lie. They invented a lie, and because they realized, because remember, Caleb is standing up saying, no, we can go into this land. We're able to overcome it. And he's speaking to the people, and they're realizing Caleb's words are having a positive impact on some of these people. We can't let that happen. We've got to fortify our case. So they continued speaking and saying, no. They started saying all of these things about the land, but then the idea is that they spread, that what happened was they literally were going from tent to tent, from group to group during that night, spreading a lie to the people, which in turn was filling the people's hearts with fear and anxiety, and then turned to anger against Moses and Aaron. And they were wanting to rebel and kill them, take them, remove them, go back to Egypt, get new leaders, whatever. And not only that, the lie that these men were spreading, fomenting fear in the hearts of the people, was slandering God's nature and character and promise. It was a slander against Him. And it fomented fear. And it brought terror and despair into the hearts of the people, to where they wept and cried all night, wished they had died in Egypt, wished they had died in the wilderness. And then, why did God bring us out to take us in to be perished by the sword? Notice how everything has shifted now from all this goodness of God, that God's mean, bad, and a liar. Somebody's been at work who's a good deceiver in the camp of Israel. That is always what he wants to do. He always wants to slander God to us. He always wants to slander God's goodness, His character, all that had been revealed to Moses on the mountain, the 13 attributes of His mercy. He slandered it. And the other thing was, they didn't just do that, but they spread lies about the land. They were making up stuff about the land that wasn't true. They were talking about the land being bad. They were talking about it being a coarse land, that it was a graveyard, they were saying, for ordinary people. And literally, because the land is so bad, guess who are the only ones that can survive in it? The giants. Tall, the big ones, the strong ones, they're the only ones who can survive there. And it's interesting that here they've been spreading this report all night long from tent to tent. And when you come to chapter 14, the people don't acknowledge that. They don't say anything to Moses and Aaron about the fact that all this has been going on all night. They don't even report it for fear that it would be exposed, that it had been told to them in private concerning these lies about the land. They hid it. It's an interesting thing about that night in Israel's history. The people, it says, cried out that night. It was a very important night. And it still is a very important time, even to this day, when the nation of Israel remembers and is tied back to that night. It is the day which is known as the 9th of the month of Av. The 9th of Av. Now, what's interesting is, it was on the night of the 9th of Av that the temples in Jerusalem would be destroyed. It's a day that the Jewish people literally mourn and have a day of mourning every single year. You cried for naught, said God. By your lives I will make this a night of crying for generations to come. Every year, Jewish tradition says that every year during that wilderness wandering, when they would come to the 9th of Av, the people would dig graves and go sleep in them, understanding that those of them who had reached the age of 60 would not rise in the morning because of the judgment that was getting ready to fall. God would say everyone above the age of 20 is not going to come into the land. So on that night, they would dig graves, lie down, knowing that they would not wake up the next morning. They would die. 40 years of wandering, they dug graves every 9th of Av. But then on that final night, That final time, no one died. And fearing they'd miscalculated the day, they tried again the next night, and then the next night. And then, of course, they got to the 15th of Av, and the full moon on the 15th day of the month indicated they had passed and that the decree of death had been lifted. And so they celebrated and they rejoiced before God. And so that day has been established as a holiday, and it's only literally rivaled by Yom Kippur in Israel. The 9th of Av was the day in which the spies returned with a bad report. Both the holy temples were destroyed. The 9th of Av was a battle called the Battle of Betar was lost. The 9th of Av was when the Romans plowed down the temple. The 9th of Av was when the Jews were expelled from England. The 9th of Av was when the Jews were banished from Spain. The 9th of Av was the day in which World War I unleashed its destruction upon the world. The 9th of Av is tied to some very significant times in Israel's history. This year it falls on August the 12th. But it's a time that's tied to that first moment when they doubted God and fear gripped their heart, and there were terrible consequences because of it. But what's interesting is here, this lie that the spies had reported about the lie. And what's interesting is that tradition says, we don't find this in the Scripture, but Jewish tradition says that the spies, when they went into the land, they broke up in pairs, like 2 by 2. And they went to these different cities. And every place they went to spy out, there were funerals going on. And they believed that what happened was God had sent a plague ahead of them and destroyed many of the leaders, had killed many of the leaders with this plague in the city. So the people in the cities were so occupied burying their leaders, they had no time to pay attention to these spies who were going throughout the land checking it out. But here's the fact, that in chapter 14, verse 9, we find that Caleb and Joshua, they're crying out and telling them not to rebel against God, neither fear the people of the land. They are bread for us. And it says their defense, or literally their shadow, is removed from over them, and Adonai is with us. Do not fear them. The reality was that the giants and the people inside the land were terrified of the Israelites. They knew they were coming, and they were scared to death. How in the world would those 10 spies who lied know what was in the heart of those people in the land? How would they know that? They wouldn't. They were making assumptions. Joshua and Caleb knew different, though, because they knew the promise of God. Joshua and Caleb reported the true state of their heart. Again, these guys were making up lies. They didn't see any They didn't see any boldness and courage there in that land when they went in. They saw the fact that these people are afraid, and Joshua and Caleb reported the truth about that. They said their protection had left them. Their shadow had left them. That literally means their pagan gods that they were looking to for protection and help had forsaken them. All the deities in the land had forsaken them, and they had no protection. They had failed them. They were, in fact, terrified of Israel. And guess what? When Israel had crossed the Red Sea, they as a whole nation sang about this reality. Exodus 15, 14 through 16 says, the peoples have heard. They tremble. Anguish takes hold of those living in Pleshet. Then the kings and chiefs of Edom are dismayed. Trepidation seizes the heads of Moab. All those living in Canaan are melted away. Terror and dread fall on them. By the might of your arm, they are still as a stone until your people pass over. Adonai, till the people you purchased forever. They, after the Red Sea event, knew that the people in the land were terrified of them. They were proclaiming this. And we find out later on, when Joshua goes in and conquers Jericho, Rahab, the prostitute, tells them, when they go in and spy out the land before he comes in to conquer Jericho, she said the two men had not yet laid down when she returned to the roof and said to them, I know that Adonai has given you the land. Fear of you has fallen on us. Everyone in the land is terrified at the thought of you. We've heard how Adonai dried up the water in the Red Sea ahead of you. when you left Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorite on the side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, that you completely destroyed them. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts failed us. Because of you, everyone is in a state of depression. For Adonai your God, He is God in heaven above and the earth beneath. That was the reality. And generally, the thing most of the time that you and I fear is much more terrified of you than you are of it. But you don't see it that way when you're listening to unbelief and doubt and fear. You see, when we face circumstances, here's something to remember. Both faith and doubt require the exact same thing. And you know what that is? Faith. One trusts that it can be done. The other trusts that it cannot. Both require faith. It's just, what are you believing? What are you believing? You see, a different spirit. We're told this. Caleb had a different spirit about him. And a different spirit is always required to overcome fear and doubt. And here's the different spirit. The spirit is the desire and the passion, the willingness to obey and follow God out of love, no matter what. When you have that spirit, there's nothing you can't face. Without it, you will fall and be tossed about like a wave on the sea or a leaf blowing in the wind. We need the power of the Spirit of God within us to follow Him in faith. See, for Israel not to move forward in faith was literally rebellion against the authority and command of God, who had already assured them of His presence, of His protection, of His power, of His provision for them. They rebelled against all of that because of the fear and unbelief. But there's also another side to this that sometimes we don't think about. It may not just be that they had fear that was controlling them, but it also may be that these guys had gotten into a comfort zone. Hey, we like having manna provided for us every morning. Hey, we like having a cloud over us in the day to shield us from the heat. Hey, we like having fire covering us at night and keeping us warm. Hey, we like having a rock that follows us, providing us with water everywhere we go. If we go in there, we got to start warring. We got to start fighting. We've got to start farming. We've got to start clearing land. We've got to start building cities. We've got to start working and doing things in the way that God has commanded us to. No. We like this place of ease and comfort where we're at now. Isn't it that way with us? God invites us into something, and most of the time when He invites us into something in our life, whatever area it might be, He's saying, get out of your comfort zone. You're too comfortable here. But we like it. Doesn't require a whole lot. I mean, Lord, I like being here. I like where I'm at. I don't want to move on. I don't want to step out. It's going to require something of me. Every time Jesus invited people into walking with Him, He told them, He said, look, I'm telling you, to follow me is going to cost you everything. You're going to have to take up a cross and follow me. Die daily to what you want, what you desire. Leave your comfort zones behind and follow me. It's a dangerous place for us to get comfortable in our walk with God. And sometimes unbelief is the very cause of that comfort. One of the things that's interesting, too, about this story is a phenomenal thing. Each of these spies, all 12 of them, they were leaders. They were men of renown in their tribe. They were princes. They were respected by their people. And Each one of their names reveals this. They had an identity that had been assigned to them through their name, that had been given to them. But every single one of them, except Joshua and Caleb, failed to live up to their true identity. They failed to do it. You see, fear and unbelief will always rob us of our maximum potential through Jesus. It will keep us from living up to the identity we have in Him. It will rob us constantly. Moses dispatched them from the desert, just like the Lord said that they could. They were leading men. There was Shammua from the tribe of Reuben. His name means renowned. He had a reputation already among his people for being a man of renown. There was Shimon. From the tribe of Shimon, there was Shaphat, which means judged. He was a prolific ruler, discerning. Then you had Caleb from the tribe of Judah, which, interestingly enough, Caleb means dog. But the idea there with dog, of course, dogs back then symbolically or metaphorically were seen as, they were not important. They were like trash. They were scum, kind of like they were scavengers. But the idea here, and this whole idea with Caleb and his name, has this idea of tenaciousness about it. Like a dog is tenacious, like a wolf, a predator. He's got a heart that is tenacious and courageous. Then you had Yigal, who was from the tribe of Issachar, which means God redeems. You had Hoshea, Joshua, which Moses changed his name to Joshua, which means salvation. His name changes, goes not just salvation, it means God saves. Then you had Palti of the tribe of Benjamin, which means my deliverance, and Gadael from the tribe of Zebulun, which means God is my fortune. And you had Gadi from the tribe of Joseph, or Manasseh, which means, again, my fortune is in God. Amiel from the tribe of Dan, my kinsman is God. And then from the tribe of Asher, you had Shtur, the son of Mikael, which means hidden. And Nakbi, the same, means hidden. And then Geuel, the son of Maki, means majesty of God. These guys had powerful attributes associated with their name. And they were little, tiny peons and chickens in reality. They didn't live up to their true identity because they didn't trust God. They didn't believe what God had assigned to them in their name. They didn't believe that God would be all of that for them and that they could be that in and through God. See, fear and unbelief will always hinder you and I from being who we truly are in Christ. And if you don't see yourself as God sees you, and God invites and calls you into something wherein you are required to trust Him, if you listen to the lies and you listen and let unbelief grip your heart, it will keep you from living up to your true identity in Jesus and rob you of great blessing. And you see, us being who we are in Jesus is what reveals Him to the world through us. So as we said the other week about the Aaronic blessing, when the blessing of Aaron, put my name on them so they will radiate and reveal to the world who I am and what I'm like. It is us being who He has made us to be before the eyes of the world as we navigate through the circumstances and challenges that are brought up by faith and not by fear. This is why the early believers were known as little Christs, Christians, because they were like their master. So I go back to what I started with in the beginning. What's driving your life this morning? Faith or fear? In the days ahead, as we move forward in our lives, we're going to face challenges. We're going to face personal challenges. We'll face family challenges. We're going to face national challenges, probably the things that we've not fathomed that we may have to face. In those moments, are we going to be not looking, but listening to Him? And our confidence and our trust is not in what we see, but on what He has said. And then stepping out and trusting Him in spite of what the circumstances around us are saying. You don't deny the circumstances. It's reality. It's there. But you see, faith is not dependent upon our circumstances. Faith is confidence and courage in who He is and what He says that produces actions that reveal those two things. What's driving your heart? What's filling your heart this morning? Faith or fear? Lord God, thank You for this illustration of tragic time in Israel's history. But again, as Paul said, the writer of Hebrews even reiterated it, that they fell because of unbelief. They missed out on Your promised rest. Lord, help none of us in this room hold back in fear, but help us to step out in faith and trust You into whatever You may be inviting us into as we walk with You. Help us to walk each day by faith and not by sight. In Your name, Jesus.